The honestest of all our declarations of defensive war have always run in this strain, and others insinuating more preposterous loyalty have been justly taxed for asserting the interest of the tyrant, the greatest enemy of the declarers and principal object of the declared war, which disingenuous juggling and foisting in such flattering and falsifying distinctions in the state of the quarrel hath rationally been thought one of the procuring causes or occasions of the discomfiture of our former appearances for the work of God and liberties of our own country. Third, this must infer an owning of his authority as lawful king, when the declaration disowning him is abjured, insofar as it declares war against his majesty. For in this oath he is styled and asserted to be king, and to have majesty as a lawful king, and thereby must be owned as such by all that take it, which yet I proved to be sinful above, in head 2. Against this it hath been quibbled by some, that declaration does not declare war against the king expressly as king who set forth the declaration. But this will not salve the matter, for then, firstly, it is a subscribing to a lie in abjuring a declaration insofar as it did declare a thing which it did not, if that hold. Second, the enemies impose the abjuring and disowning of it insofar as it declares war against their king, who had none other but Charles Stuart at that time, who was the king in their sense, and an oath cannot be taken in any other sense, contradictory to the imposers, even though by them allowed, without an unjustifiable equivocation. Thirdly, though he had been king, and had not committed such acts of tyranny as might actually denominate him a tyrant and forfeit his kingship, yet to repress his illegal arbitrariness and intolerable enormities, and to repel his unjust violence, and reduce him to good order, subjects, at least for their own defense, may declare a war expressly, purposely, and designedly against their own acknowledged king. This ought not in so far to be disowned, for then all our declarations emitted during the whole time of prosecuting the Reformation, in opposition to our king would be disowned, and so with one dash, unhappily the whole work of Reformation, and the way of carrying it on, is hereby tacitly and consequentially reflected upon and reproached, if not disowned. Fourthly, it must infer an owning of the ecclesiastical supremacy when it asserts that some do serve the king in church as well as in state. There is no distinction here, but they are said to serve him the same way in both. And it is certain they mean so, and have expressed so much in their acts, that churchmen are as subordinate and the same way subject to the king's supremacy as statesmen are, the absurdity and blasphemy of which is discovered above. Fifthly, this condemns all killing of any that serve the king in church, state, army, or country, for a declaration is abjured, insofar as it asserts it lawful to kill any such, and so by this oath there is an impunity secured for his idolatrous priests and murdering varlets that serve him in the church, for his bloody counselors and gowned murderers that serve his tyrannical designs in the state, and for his bloody lictors and executioners, the swordsmen that serve him in the army, whom he may send when he pleases to murder us, and for his bloody just asses, informers and intelligencing sycophants, the Ziphites that serve him in the country, all these must escape bringing to condign punishment, contrary to the 4th article of the Solemn League and Covenant, and shall be confuted, head 6. Against this it is accepted by the pleaders for this oath that it is only a declared abhorring of murdering principles which no Christian dare refuse, and it may be taken in this sense safely that it is to be abjured, insofar as it asserts it lawful to kill all that are to be employed by his majesty, or any, because so employed in church, state, army, or country, which never did any assert was lawful. But though murdering principles are indeed always to be declaredly abhorred, and all refusers of that oath did both declare so much and abhor the thoughts of them, yet this invasion is naught. For first, the declaration asserts no such thing, neither for that cause nor for any other, but expressly makes a distinction between persons under the epithet of bloody cruel murderers, and these only whom it threateneth to animadvert upon. Secondly, the only reason of their declared intent of prosecuting these whom they threaten to bring to condign punishment was because they were so employed by the tyrant in such service, as shedding the blood of innocents, murdering people where they met them, and so that's the very reason for which they deserve to be killed, and therefore foolish, impertinent, and very absurd to be alleged as a qualification of the sense in that impious oath. Number 5. If we consider the proclamation enjoining this oath, and narrating and explaining the occasions and causes of it, all these reasons against it will be confirmed, and it will further appear that the proclamation itself is indirectly approved. For though it might be sustained in the abstract that we may and must renounce such declarations found on principles inconsistent with government and bearing such inferences are specified in that proclamation, yet complexly considered what they mean by government, and what sort of society that is, the security whereof is said to be infringed by that declaration, and what is the scope of that narrative, a renouncing of a paper contradictory thereto must be in so far a tacit approbation of that proclamation. For that oath which renounceth what is contrary to such a proclamation does justify the proclamation, but this oath renounces what is contrary to the proclamation, and that only. Therefore it justifies the proclamation. It is entitled, as it was really designed, for discovering such as own or will not disown the foresaid declaration, by them falsely nicknamed, a late treasonable declaration of war against his Majesty, and the horrid principle of assassination. And the people of it discovers such hell-bred hatred of and malice against that poor party, destinated in their design to final and total destruction, and lays down such contrivances for their discovery and ruin, that the heads and hearts of the inventors and authors may seem to be possessed and inspired with the devil's immediately assisting counsel, and the clerk's pen that drew it up to have been dipped in the Stygian lake and the gall and venom of hell, representing the emitters and abettors and spreaders of that declaration, and all who have been joined in any of their societies, and all who either will own or scruple to disown the said declaration in the manner by them tendered and imposed, which are the generality of most tender and conscientious Christians in the land, under all the vilest and most abominable and odious terms their malice could invent, as if they were, quote, insolent and desperate rebels, associated under a pretended form of government, who had formerly endeavored to disguise their bloody and execrable principles, but now had pulled off the mask, and who think it a duty to kill and murder all who do any manner of way serve the present rulers, or bear charge under them, who maintain principles inconsistent with all government and society, and tending to the destruction of the lives of their loyal and honest subjects, treacherous and assassinating principles, etc., who now have declared their hellish intentions, and for the better performance of their mischievous designs, do lurk in secret, and are never discerned but in the acts of their horrid assassinations, and passing up and down among the king's loyal subjects, take opportunity to murder and assassinate like execrable rebels, and calling that declaration an execrable and damnable paper, unquote, etc. All which are execrable and damnable lies and forgeries of the fathers of them, and a charge which all their sophistry can never make out in any particular, yet by them amplified to a swelling height of heinousness, and, among other circumstances, aggravated from their frequent refusing the reiterated offers of their clemency, by which they understand their contempt of their presumptuous, Christ-denying, and church-destroying indulgences, and their not submitting to that ensnaring and base indemnities, or their conscience-cheating bonds and oaths by them so finely busked. From these impudently pretended premises, in their falsely forged viperous narrative, they lay down their bloody methods and measures for prosecuting that poor people with all vigor of savage severity, ordaining, quote, that whosoever shall own that declaration and the principles there specified, unquote, which is a larger dilation of their meaning than their pretended restriction, insofar as, etc., and gives a further discovery of the intent of the oath, that gives a covert stroke to all the principles of our Reformation, which are reductively specified in that declaration, quote, or whosoever shall refuse to disown the same shall be executed to the death, and commanding all subjects to concur and do their uttermost endeavor to seek, search, delate, and apprehend all such, under the severest penalties of the laws, and to difference the good from the bad, meaning their own associates and friends from Christ's followers, by discriminating signs, declaring it their pleasure, and requiring all past the age of 16 years not to presume to travel without testificates of their loyalty and good principles, by taking the oath of abjuration, whereupon they are to have a testificate, which is to serve for a free pass, with certification to all that shall adventure to travel without such a testificate, shall be holden and used as concurrers with the said rebels, commanding all heritors, etc., to give up the lists of the names of all under them, before the curate, declaring, if any shall refuse to concur in such service, they shall be holden as guilty of the foresaid crimes and punished accordingly, and strictly prohibiting all to harbor, lodge, or entertain any, unless they have such certificates, under the same pain, and for encouragement to any that shall discover or apprehend any to be found guilty, as above said, insuring to them the sum of 500 merks Scots for each of them." Unquote. This is that hell-hacked proclamation, so grievous for its effects, so dreadful in its designs, so monstrous in its absurdities, that the like hath not been seen, whereby not only the country's interest and trade hath been prejudged, by compelling all to have a pass in time of peace, and these to be procured at exorbitant rates, oppressing poor people, not only common holsters and innkeepers are made judges, empowered to impose oaths upon passengers for their passes, that they be not forged, but many consciences cozened, cheated, wounded, and ensnared, and the whole land involved in sin. But they that took this oath have approved and justified this detestable, execrable, bloody proclamation, the spurious spawn of the devil's venom against Christ's followers. For they gave all the obedience to it that was required of them in their capacity, and obedience justifies the law enjoining it. They have done all was required, or could be done by them, to answer the design of it in the circumstances, and consequently, by doing the thing prescribed, they have justified the grounds upon which the rescript was founded, and the methods by which it was prosecuted, which hath a dreadful medley of iniquity in it. Hence, firstly, they have subscribed to all these odious characters wherewith they branded that poor persecuted party, and condemned them as insolent, desperate rebels, murderers, bloody assassins, etc. Secondly, in disowning that declaration, they have disowned the principles therein specified, and consequently all the testimony against this usurping faction of overturners of the work of reformation, active and passive, that hath been given and sealed by the eminent servants of God since this catastrophe, and principle of defensive arms, and our covenants, and several others which are therein specified. Thirdly, they have given their consent to all the concurrence therein required for seeking, searching, dilating, and apprehending of these people, and to all the cruel villainies committed against them. Fourthly, they have taken on their prescribed discriminating sign of loyalty, and of being reputed by them men of good principles, that is, their friends, men of the times, which is so sinful and scandalous that it is shameful to hint at them, and yet shameful to hide them. Number 6. If we consider the apologetical declaration itself, which is so bespattered, and so odiously represented, and so rigorously enjoined to be abjured, who will more narrowly look into it and ponder and perpend the purpose and scope of it, will see nothing that can be abjured conscientiously in it, but the whole of it, laying aside prejudice and invidious critical censoriousness, capable of a fair and acceptable construction, the motives leading them to set it forth being only their desires and just endeavors to prosecute and secure themselves in the prosecution of wholly commanded duties, and to keep a standing testimony against the insolency of those that are given up of God, to lay out themselves in promoving a course of profanity and persecution, notwithstanding of all their viperous threatenings.